Egypt has always been a crossroads. It sits where Africa meets Asia, a stone's throw from Europe. The map tells the story. For millennia, this geography was its strength. It was a bridge for trade. It was a bridge for ideas. It was a bridge for empires. Today, that same geography is the source of an immense and often invisible pressure. Egypt is a transit point for those moving north. It is a destination for those fleeing chaos. It is a departure lounge for its own youth. And it is, increasingly, a control point, paid by Europe to be a gatekeeper. This unique combination has pushed the country's migration system to a breaking point. A slow-motion crisis that unfolds not in dramatic headlines, but in endless queues and quiet desperation. To the west is Libya, a failed state and a launchpad for deadly sea crossings. To the east, the Sinai Peninsula remains a sensitive security zone and a shadowy smuggling route. To the north is the Mediterranean Sea, a graveyard for some and a gateway for others. These external pressures converge on Cairo, a sprawling megacity already bursting at the seams. It is here that the weight of regional collapse truly lands, straining every public service and creating a pressure cooker of human need. This is not a new role for Egypt. The country has hosted refugees for decades, often with a quiet generosity not seen in wealthier nations. But the scale and speed of the current situation are unprecedented. The simultaneous collapse of multiple neighboring states has created a perfect storm. The system for managing this influx was never designed for such a sustained, multi-front crisis. It was a system built for peacetime, for a world where borders were more than just lines on a map. Now, it is overwhelmed. The gears are grinding, the paperwork is piling up, and the people caught in the middle are paying the price. Understanding this meltdown requires looking at Egypt not as a single entity, but as the epicenter of a regional earthquake. Each border tells a different story of desperation and movement. Inside the country, a parallel story unfolds, one of a young, ambitious population looking for opportunities that their homeland cannot provide. The government is caught in a difficult bind. It must manage the expectations of its own citizens. It must secure its vast, porous borders. And it must satisfy the demands of its European partners, who want the flows stopped at any cost. This is the story of that pressure, the one no one sees. The border crossing at Arkin is little more than a few buildings in the vast Nubian desert. For years, it was a sleepy outpost. Today, it is the epicenter of a humanitarian catastrophe. Since the outbreak of civil war in Sudan in 2023, an unending river of people has flowed north. The UNHCR says over 1.5 million Sudanese have crossed into Egypt, and that number grows by the thousands each week. They arrive dehydrated, exhausted, stripped of their possessions, carrying stories of unimaginable horror. They are not just seeking refuge, they are fleeing annihilation. Egypt's initial response was open arms. The government called Sudanese guests, not refugees. But hospitality has limits when numbers overwhelm. Aswan and nearby villages have been transformed. Local schools are full. Hospitals are turning people away. The rental market has skyrocketed, pushing out Egyptian families. Aid agencies, local and international, are stretched to the absolute limit, their resources a drop in an ocean of need. The volume of arrivals has swamped services, creating secondary public health crises and social friction. The journey is a filter, weeding out the weak and the poor. Smugglers control routes out of Khartoum and Darfur, charging life savings for a seat on a crowded bus or a precarious flatbed truck. Those who cannot pay are stuck. Those who can pay arrive with nothing left. We met Dr. Fatima in a crowded Cairo apartment with 3 other families. She paid smugglers $5,000 to get her and her 2 children out of Khartoum. They took everything at the last checkpoint, she said. My degree, my wedding ring, even the children's shoes. We arrived in Aswan with only the clothes we were wearing. This southern floodgate is not just a humanitarian issue. It is a profound challenge to Egypt's stability. The influx pressures a fragile economy battling inflation and unemployment. The government's policy of welcome clashes with reality on the ground, where resources are finite and public patience is wearing thin. The crisis has moved major demographic and social problems northward, depositing them on Egypt's doorstep. Cairo is now managing a crisis not of its making, with little help from the outside world. The Sinai Peninsula is a land of stark contrasts. It is a region of breathtaking natural beauty, with Red Sea resorts that draw tourists from around the globe. It is also a tightly controlled military zone, the front line in Egypt's long-running battle against Islamist insurgents. This dual identity has created a unique and dangerous environment for migration. The heavy security presence makes official movement difficult, but it has also given rise to a sophisticated and ruthless shadow economy run by human traffickers and smugglers. These networks have deep roots in the region, preying on some of the world's most vulnerable people. For years, Sinai was a primary transit route for African migrants, Eritrea-Ethiopia. That route has been largely sealed by a formidable border fence. But the smuggling networks remain. They have adapted, shifting their focus. Now they move people within the region, facilitate illegal crossings into other parts of Egypt, hold migrants for ransom. The lawlessness that exists in the peninsula's remote valleys, mountains, creates pockets where the authority of the state is weak, and the rule of the smuggler is absolute. It is a high-risk, high-reward business built on human misery. The Egyptian military's primary focus in Sinai is counterterrorism. This is a legitimate and necessary priority. However, it creates an enforcement trade-off. Resources are dedicated to fighting insurgents, not necessarily to dismantling complex trafficking rings that often have ties to local Bedouin tribes. The smugglers are adept at using the rugged terrain to their advantage, moving small groups through ancient, hidden paths, invisible to military patrols and checkpoints. They operate in the gray zones, exploiting the security vacuum and the desperation of their human cargo. The result is a persistent, low-level flow of people that evades official statistics and formal controls. This eastern corridor represents a different kind of pressure. It is not the overwhelming flood seen from Sudan, but a corrosive, underground current. It undermines the rule of law and fuels corruption. It also poses a direct security threat, as the lines between smuggling, trafficking, and terrorism can often blur. For the migrants who fall into the hands of these networks, the experience is often brutal. Reports from human rights organizations detail cases of extortion, violence, and abuse. To Egypt's west lies a gaping wound, Libya. Chaos since 2011 splintered between rival governments, militias, foreign powers. A 1,100-kilometer border, a vast, unpatrollable expanse of sand, rock. Libya has become a magnet for migrants from Africa, from the Middle East, hoping for a sea route to Europe. For Egypt, this is a two-way problem. Instability on its doorstep, a revolving door of migrants. The main flow, Egyptian workers. Decades-long destination, Libya, construction, agriculture. Higher wages still lure them. Hundreds of thousands work there, often in dangerous, exploitative conditions. They cross legally, many do not, into a failed state with no protections. Vulnerable to kidnapping by militias, exploitation by employers, getting caught in crossfire. A constant consular headache for Cairo and anxiety for families. Libya is the staging ground for the Central Mediterranean route, the world's deadliest sea crossing. Many from sub-Saharan Africa depart. A significant number are Egyptian. Lack of opportunity at home, bureaucratic hurdles push them to the boat to Italy. Departures run by ruthless smuggling networks operating with impunity in coastal cities, Zawiya, Zuwara. Every sinking boat with Egyptian lives is a national tragedy and political embarrassment. The border is a sieve. Egyptian forces patrol, but length makes control impossible. It channels people, and smuggled weapons, drugs, extremist ideologies. Libya's instability bleeds across the border, threatening Egypt's national security. Managing the western frontier is costly and exhausting. Egypt pours military and financial resources into containment, a drain on other national priorities. The migration crisis in Egypt is not just about foreigners coming in, it is also about Egyptians trying to get out. The country has one of the youngest populations in the world. According to the World Bank, over 60% of its 115 million people are under the age of 30. This youth bulge should be a demographic gift, a source of energy and innovation. Instead, it is a source of immense social pressure. Young Egyptians are graduating from universities in record numbers, armed with degrees and ambitions. But the formal economy cannot create enough jobs to absorb them, leading to widespread frustration and a pervasive sense of a blocked future. This frustration is visible everywhere. It is in the crowded cafes of downtown Cairo, where young men with engineering degrees serve tea. It is in the online forums where students trade tips on how to apply for scholarships abroad. And it is in the staggering queues that form outside passport offices and visa application centers. The demand for a way out is enormous. For many, migration is not a choice, but a necessity. It is seen as the only path to a stable career, a decent salary, the ability to build a family and a life. This desire transcends social class, affecting everyone from farm laborers to highly skilled professionals. The state's administrative machinery is buckling under this internal demand. Getting a new passport can take months, a process riddled with delays and bureaucratic hurdles. Securing a visa for Europe or North America is even harder, an expensive and often humiliating lottery. These bottlenecks do not stop the desire to leave, they simply displace it. When legal pathways are blocked, people turn to illegal ones. It fuels the market for smugglers who promise passage across the Mediterranean. It encourages overstaying tourist visas. It creates an entire generation that feels trapped, disconnected from a state that cannot meet their most basic aspirations for a better life. The drivers for this exodus are clear. Economic stagnation is the primary engine. Years of high inflation have eroded purchasing power, making it nearly impossible for a young person to get married, buy an apartment, or start a business. But there are also social and political factors. Many young people feel a lack of personal freedom and a sense of disillusionment with the political climate. They look at the world through their smartphones and see opportunities and liberties that are unavailable at home. The diaspora, which sends back billions in remittances, acts as a powerful advertisement for life abroad, showcasing a success that seems unattainable within Egypt's borders. Cairo has long been a city of refuge. Walk through certain neighborhoods and you will hear the accents of Damascus. Khartoum. Sana'a, Egypt, hosts one of the largest urban refugee populations in the world. According to government figures from 2024, there are over 9 million migrants and refugees living in the country, a staggering number. This includes large, established communities of Syrians who fled their civil war, Sudan, South Sudan, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Yemen. Unlike in many other countries, there are no sprawling refugee camps. Instead, these populations are integrated into Egyptian cities and towns. This policy of integration has been a point of pride, but it is now a source of immense strain. The public services that support Egyptians are the same ones that must now support millions of newcomers. In working-class neighborhoods like Ain Shams, 6th of October City, schools that were already overcrowded now have classes with 80 or 90 students, many of whom do not speak Arabic as a first language. Public hospitals, which already faced shortages of medicine and staff, are now dealing with the health needs of populations traumatized by war and displacement. The pressure on the housing market is intense, with rising rents pushing both Egyptians and refugees into ever more precarious living situations. The economic impact is also profound. Refugees and migrants are not just consumers of services, they are also economic actors. Many start small businesses, opening restaurants, shops, and workshops that enrich the local culture and create jobs. However, they also compete for low-wage work in the informal sector, sometimes driving down wages in construction, domestic work, and agriculture. This can create resentment among the local Egyptian population, who are themselves struggling to make ends meet. The government, wary of social friction, often downplays these tensions, but they are a real and growing part of the daily experience in many communities. The sheer diversity of the refugee population creates its own challenges. Each community has different needs. Syrians often arrive with more capital and urban skills. Sudanese may be fleeing immediate violence with nothing. Eritreans face unique protection risks. Yemenis struggle with a lack of clear legal status. Meeting the needs of all these groups requires a sophisticated and well-funded response. But the international community provides only a fraction of the necessary funding. Egypt is left to shoulder the vast majority of the cost, managing a global crisis on a national budget. The European Union watches the pressure building in Egypt with growing alarm. For Brussels, the primary concern is not the humanitarian situation within Egypt, but the potential for onward movement. The memory of the 2015 migration crisis, when over 1 million asylum seekers arrived on European shores, still haunts the continent's politics. The EU's overriding policy objective is to prevent a repeat of that event. This has led to a strategy of externalization, paying neighboring countries to act as border guards. Egypt, due to its strategic location and its control over the Suez Canal, is the cornerstone of this strategy in the eastern Mediterranean. This policy takes the form of multi-billion euro aid and investment packages. The latest deal, signed in 2024, pledged $7.4 billion to Egypt. While publicly framed as a partnership for economic development and green energy, a significant portion is implicitly tied to migration control. A stable Egyptian economy is less likely to produce its own migrants. A well-funded Egyptian government is better equipped to stop others from passing through. This funding supports the Egyptian Coast Guard. It provides border surveillance technology. It finances programs aimed at creating jobs for young people. This transactional relationship places the Egyptian government in a powerful but difficult position. Cairo can leverage Europe's fear of migration to secure financial aid and political support. It knows that the EU needs Egypt to be a stable and cooperative partner. However, this partnership comes with strings attached. Egypt is expected to crack down on smuggling networks. Egypt is expected to intercept boats leaving its shores. Egypt is expected to absorb millions of refugees who might otherwise have tried to reach Europe. It is effectively being asked to do Europe's dirty work, managing a problem that European nations are unwilling to face on their own soil. This creates a deep and often unspoken resentment. The EU's focus on enforcement above all else has unintended consequences. It does little to address the root causes of migration. Wars in Sudan, wars in Syria, lack of economic opportunity within Egypt itself. By focusing on stopping movement, it can inadvertently strengthen the hand of smugglers, who can charge higher prices for riskier journeys. It also raises difficult questions about human rights, as migrants and refugees are contained in a country where they may face an uncertain legal status and a strained social environment. Europe's fortress walls are not being built on the shores of Italy or Greece, but in the deserts and cities of Egypt. The system grinds to a halt. The paper jam, a system grinds to a halt because the breakdown of Egypt's migration system is most visible in its bureaucracy. The government's administrative apparatus, a legacy of a highly centralized state, was never designed to handle the current volume and complexity of movement. The result is a colossal paper jam, a system-wide failure that affects everyone: a Sudanese family seeking asylum, an Egyptian student trying to get a visa. The core of the problem is a chronic lack of resources, outdated procedures, and institutional culture that is resistant to change. The system is not just overwhelmed, it is broken. Take the simple act of renewing a passport. For an Egyptian citizen, this should be a routine process. Instead, it can become a months-long ordeal. Offices are understaffed and overwhelmed. The online systems are prone to crashing. A backlog of applications means that wait times have ballooned from weeks to months. For someone with a job offer, a university admission abroad, these delays can be catastrophic, causing them to lose life-changing opportunities. This inefficiency is not just an inconvenience, it is a barrier that traps people, fueling their frustration with the state. For refugees and migrants, the situation is infinitely more complex. Registering with UNHCR, obtaining a yellow card, appointments are difficult to get. The offices are concentrated in Cairo, forcing people from all over the country to travel. Residency permits and government documentation are another maze. Multiple visits to different ministries, long queues, and often the payment of informal fees to speed things up. This administrative limbo leaves millions in a state of legal uncertainty, unable to work legally, enroll their children in school, or access health care. Underneath it all is a critical shortage of trained staff. Civil servants are often poorly paid, lack specialized training in migration law or refugee protection, and are working with inadequate equipment. They are the frontline soldiers in this crisis, facing a daily tsunami of human need with little support. This leads to burnout, inefficiency, and in some cases, corruption. The system's failure is not the fault of any single individual. It is a structural collapse. The paper jam is a symptom of a much deeper problem: a state infrastructure that has not kept pace with the realities of a region in turmoil. The human costs, the faces behind the files. Behind the statistics and policy debates are individual human lives, upended by the migration meltdown. Separated families lost opportunities, years spent waiting in limbo. Consider the story of Ahmed, a 24-year-old graduate in Alexandria with a degree in pharmacology. He secured a scholarship for a master's program in Germany, a golden ticket to a better future. But his passport renewal was delayed for 5 months. He missed his enrollment deadline. The scholarship was withdrawn.
I did everything right. I studied hard. I got the grades. I was accepted. My own country's paperwork stopped me.
The impact on refugee families is even more acute. We met a Syrian woman named Huda in a small apartment in Giza. She fled Aleppo in 2014. With her husband, with her 3 children. Her husband, a skilled carpenter, died from a heart attack last year, worn down by working illegally for low wages. Now Huda tries to support her family by cooking food for her neighbors. Her eldest son, who is 17, has dropped out of school to work as a delivery boy to help make rent.
He wanted to be an engineer.
In Syria, he was top of his class. Here he is just another poor boy on a motorbike. The crisis also affects Egyptian workers abroad and their families at home. When violence flares up in Libya, families of the men working there spend weeks in agonizing uncertainty, unable to make contact. The remittances they rely on might suddenly stop. A father from a village in the Nile Delta told us his son went to Libya 3 years ago to work on a construction site. He has not heard from him in 6 months.
We don't know if he is alive or dead.
Every day we pray. Every day we wait by the phone. This is our life now, just waiting. These are not isolated incidents. They are representative of millions of stories unfolding across Egypt every day. Students whose dreams are deferred by bureaucracy, workers whose labor is exploited in lawless states, refugees who have traded the violence of war for the quiet desperation of poverty and uncertainty. The human cost of the migration crisis is not found in government reports or EU funding agreements. It is found in the small, daily tragedies of people whose lives have been put on hold, their futures held hostage by forces far beyond their control. The simple reasons for a complex crisis. The crisis enveloping Egypt can seem overwhelmingly complex, a tangle of geopolitics, economics, and human flows. But the core causes are surprisingly simple and can be boiled down to 4 key factors. First, and most importantly, is profound regional instability. The state failures in Libya, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen are the primary engines of this crisis. War and collapse push millions of people from their homes, and Egypt, due to its geography and relative stability, is the inevitable destination. It is absorbing the consequences of its neighbors' implosions. The second reason is the powerful and adaptable business of human smuggling. This is not a collection of amateurs, but a network of sophisticated transnational criminal enterprises. They are expert logisticians of misery. They thrive on instability and weak governance, exploiting border vacuums and corrupt officials. They are also masters of market dynamics, adapting their routes, prices, and methods in response to enforcement efforts. The third cause is relentless demand, both internal and external. Externally, millions of refugees have no other safe place to go. Internally, millions of young Egyptians see no viable future for themselves at home. This dual demand puts enormous pressure on the state from both directions. Finally, the crisis is exacerbated by severely limited resources and administrative capacity. Egypt is not a wealthy country. It does not have the financial resources, the institutional infrastructure, or the trained personnel to adequately manage a crisis of this magnitude. The state's bureaucracy was already struggling to serve its own population before millions of newcomers arrived. The system is overloaded and underfunded. It is trying to solve a 21st-century global problem with a 20th-century national bureaucracy. These 4 factors, regional collapse, criminal networks, crushing demand, and state incapacity, have combined to create the perfect storm. The path forward, cooperation or collapse. The pressures on Egypt are not temporary. They are the new reality of the 21st century in this region. The civil war in Sudan is unlikely to be resolved soon. Libya will remain fragmented for the foreseeable future. The economic and demographic pressures within Egypt will continue to grow. The future, therefore, holds not a resolution to this crisis, but its intensification. Without a significant change in approach, the system will move from a state of meltdown to one of total collapse, with dire consequences for Egypt, the wider region, including Europe. The first and most urgent step is a radical modernization and investment in Egypt's administrative capacity. This is not about more border guards. It is about building a migration management system that is modern, efficient, humane. This means digitizing records, opening more processing centers, training staff in international law, creating transparent procedures, passport renewals, asylum claims. It requires a fundamental shift from a security-focused mindset to a service-oriented one. This is a huge undertaking that Egypt cannot accomplish alone. This leads to the second critical need: genuine and sustained international cooperation. The current model, where Europe pays Egypt to be a gatekeeper, is not sustainable. It fosters resentment and fails to address the root problems. A true partnership would involve significant, long-term investment in Egypt's public services, its schools, hospitals, infrastructure, that benefit both Egyptians and refugees. It would mean creating more legal pathways for migration for both skilled workers and for those seeking protection. That would undermine the smuggling business. It would also mean sharing the responsibility of resettlement for the most vulnerable refugees, Ultimately, stability in Egypt is a shared interest. A collapsing Egypt would send shockwaves across 3 continents. It would unleash migration flows that would dwarf anything seen before and create a security vacuum that would be a gift to extremists. The choice is stark. The international community can continue with short-sighted containment policy, watching the pressure build until the dam inevitably breaks. Or it can choose to invest in a comprehensive, cooperative, and humane solution that supports Egypt, respects the dignity of migrants, and addresses the shared challenges of a world in motion. The time to make that choice is now. Egypt stands at the center of a global migration storm, balancing compassion, security, opportunity, and pressure. Subscribe for more adventures.